The training hall echoed with voices. Warriors from across the galaxy gathered after another long day of exercises. They sat in groups, drinking strange liquids from their home worlds and telling stories. This was the tradition at the Galactic Coalition training facility. Every evening, soldiers shared tales of their people's greatest battles. Thrix clicked his mandibles together, a sign of excitement among his insect-like species. He stood on 4 legs while his upper arms gestured wildly. And then, my hive brother struck down 3 enemies with one swing. The other clan spoke of his courage for generations. The others cheered. A reptilian warrior named Velnoth nodded with approval. He had been a commander for 20 cycles and had heard many such stories. Each species had their proud moments. Each had legends they loved to share. But in the corner of the room, 3 humans sat quietly. Corporal Hyun Taeyang leaned back in his chair, listening but not speaking. Next to him, Specialist Kang Nari smiled politely at the stories. The third human, a young man named Kwon Minho, looked uncomfortable whenever the talk turned to violence. "What about the humans?" someone called out.
"You never share your stories."
Taeyang's smile didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "We don't have much to tell," he said simply. "That cannot be true." Thrix insisted. "Every species has war stories. Every civilization has warriors. Perhaps human history is peaceful," suggested a blue-skinned female with gills. "Perhaps you have no battles to speak of." Nari took a sip of her drink. "Something like that," she said softly. Velnoth watched this exchange carefully. He had been watching the humans for weeks now. They were excellent fighters. In training exercises, they moved with precision and skill. Taeyang in particular was extraordinary. Yet they never spoke of where they learned these skills. They never mentioned wars or conflicts or famous victories. It was strange. Every species that came to the facility brought pride in their martial history. The Krill spoke of aerial battles. The Thorians shared songs of ancient duels. Even the peaceful Lumini had stories of defensive stands against invaders. But humans? They changed the subject. They made jokes. They found excuses to leave. The next morning began with combat simulations. The trainees entered a large room where holographic enemies would appear. The exercise tested reflexes and tactical thinking. Most cadets worked in teams, calling out positions and coordinating attacks. Velnoth stood in the observation deck, watching the displays. He focused on Taeyang's group. The young corporal led a mixed team of 5 soldiers from different species. The simulation began. Hostile targets materialized from all directions. What happened next made Velnoth lean forward. Taeyang didn't shout orders. He made small hand gestures. His team moved like a single organism. Within seconds, they had established a defensive position. Enemies fell with precise shots. When one opponent got close, Taeyang disarmed it with a movement so fast that the cameras barely captured it. The technique was nothing Velnoth recognized. It wasn't Krill combat style or Thorian martial arts. It was something else entirely. Something efficient and brutal and strangely controlled. The simulation ended. Taeyang's team had the highest score of the day. Not by a small margin, but by nearly double. In the debriefing room, Velnoth asked him about it. "Where did you learn that disarming technique?" Taeyang shrugged. "Basic training, sir. I have studied combat styles from 40 species. I have never seen that move." "It's just something we practice," Taeyang said. His voice was respectful but final. The conversation was over. Later that week, an incident occurred in the dining hall. A large Thorian cadet named Grux had been bullying smaller trainees. He was twice the size of most species and enjoyed using his strength to intimidate others. On this particular day, he pushed a small Lumine too hard. The gentle creature fell, hitting its head on a table. Minho, the young human, was nearby. He stood up. "Stop," Grux laughed. "What will you do, soft skin?" "I'm asking you to stop," Minho repeated. His voice was calm. Grux reached out to push Minho. What happened next lasted less than 2 seconds. Minho moved sideways, caught Grux's arm and twisted. There was a loud crack. Grux screamed and fell to his knees. His arm bent at an angle that made others look away. Minho released him immediately. His face showed no anger, no satisfaction. Instead, he looked almost sad. "Medical team to the dining hall," he said into his communicator. When security arrived, witnesses gave their reports. Everyone confirmed that Minho had defended another cadet. Grux had attacked first. But what disturbed the witnesses wasn't the fact that Minho had won the fight. It was how easily he had won. It was the perfect control he had shown. It was the way he had broken Grux's arm with the same casual motion someone might use to open a door. Dr. Yoon Hana, the human psychologist, arrived to take statements. She spoke with each witness privately. Velnoth noticed that after talking to her, the alien cadet seemed calmer, less frightened. She had a gentle way of speaking that made others trust her, but Velnoth couldn't shake his unease. He had seen that look in Minho's eyes right after the fight. It wasn't the look of someone who had defended himself. It was the look of someone who had done something they wished they hadn't needed to do. That evening, the gathering was quieter than usual. Fewer stories were told. People kept glancing at the humans. Minho sat with his fellow humans who spoke to him in low voices. They weren't congratulating him. They seemed to be comforting him. Thrix approached Velnoth after the gathering ended. "Commander, something is wrong with the humans." "Explain," Velnoth said. "They fight like they have done it for their whole lives. They move like combat is normal to them, but they act like they are ashamed of it." Thrix's antennae twitched with confusion. "My people celebrate our warriors. We honor those who protect us. But humans act like fighting is a burden." Velnoth had noticed the same thing. Perhaps their culture is different. Or perhaps they are hiding something, Thrix suggested. That night, Velnoth couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Taiyang's mysterious technique, about Minho's controlled violence, about the way every human at the facility deflected questions about their military history. He accessed his terminal and searched for human combat records in the Coalition database. The search returned thousands of results. But when he tried to open any file, the same message appeared. Classified. Level Omega clearance required. Velnoth had level 5 clearance. He could access military secrets from most species. But human combat history required Omega clearance. That was the highest classification in the entire Coalition. That level was reserved for extinction-level threats and planet-killing weapons. Why would stories of human battles require that level of security? Velnoth stared at the screen for a long time. Around him, the station hummed with the quiet sounds of night. Somewhere in this facility, humans slept peacefully. They trained alongside other species. They followed orders. They were polite and professional. But they were hiding something. Something big enough that the entire Galactic Coalition had decided to lock it away behind the highest security classification that existed. Commander Velnoth made a decision. He would find out the truth. Whatever the humans were hiding, he would discover it, even if it meant breaking a few rules. Velnoth couldn't keep what he learned to himself. The next day, he quietly shared the corrupted files with a small group of senior cadets. Thrix was among them, along with a Lumine named Resh and a Krill pilot named Vex. They gathered in a secure room after training hours. "This cannot be real," Resh whispered, looking at the casualty numbers. Her bioluminescent skin flickered with distress. "No species fights this much among themselves." "The data is corrupted," Thrix said, though his voice was uncertain. "Perhaps the numbers are wrong." Vex, whose species had excellent vision, zoomed in on the partially loaded image. "Look at their faces," she said softly. "Look at how young they are." The humans in the trench photo were indeed young. Some looked barely old enough to be considered adults. Yet they held weapons and stood in destroyed landscape like it was normal. "We need more information," Thrix decided. "These files are incomplete. We need to know if this is truly representative of human history." Over the next 2 weeks, the group worked together to gather more data. They pooled their credits to hire additional information brokers. They searched through public databases for mentions of Earth, the human homeworld. They looked for any scrap of information that wasn't classified. What they found painted a disturbing picture. Humans had only been traveling through space for about 200 years. Before that, they were confined to their single planet. But during those thousands of years on Earth, they had been fighting constantly. The records showed war after war, conflict after conflict, with barely any time of true peace between them. "Here," Vex said, pointing to a timeline she had reconstructed. "This period shows 47 separate conflicts happening at the same time. In the same era, on the same planet." "That's impossible," Resh said. "How could any species survive that?" "They didn't just survive," Thrix noted, reading another document. "They thrived. Their population kept growing. Their technology kept advancing. They were fighting each other and building civilizations at the same time. The group discovered lists of human weapons. Many were now banned by coalition law. Chemical weapons that destroyed lungs, biological weapons that spread disease, nuclear weapons that could level entire cities. And humans had used all of these weapons, not in theory but in actual combat, against each other. Why? Resh asked desperately. Why would they do this to themselves? None of them had an answer. One evening, as they reviewed their findings, Lieutenant Bei Jisoo walked past the room they were using. She was a human pilot, known for her excellent flight skills and friendly demeanor. She glanced through the open door and saw what was on their screens. Jisoo stopped. Her pleasant expression faded. What are you doing? She asked quietly. The group exchanged guilty looks. They had been caught. We're just researching, Thrick said. Public information only. Jisoo walked into the room and closed the door behind her. She looked at each screen, seeing the documents and images they had collected. Her face showed no anger, only deep concern. You need to stop, she said. We have a right to know, Vex argued. We train with humans every day. We deserve to understand who we're working with. You really don't understand what you're looking for, Jisoo said. There was something in her voice that made them all pause. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Please, for your own sake, stop digging. Are these records accurate? Velnoth asked directly. Did humans really fight this much? Jisoo was quiet for a long moment. The records you're finding are incomplete, she finally said. They don't show the full picture. Then show us the full picture, Thrix demanded. Help us understand. I can't, Jisoo said. I'm not authorized. But I'm asking you as someone who cares about you. Stop searching. Some knowledge is heavy. Some truths are hard to carry. You don't need this burden. She left the room, but her words stayed with them. The group debated for hours. Should they stop? Should they continue? In the end, curiosity won. They had come too far to turn back now. Their breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Resh discovered an old cultural database that had been donated to a coalition university. It contained human entertainment files, stories, movies, music, from before they joined the coalition. These files were meant to help other species understand human culture, so they weren't classified. But entertainment often reflected reality. The group watched several human movies about war. They were shocked by what they saw. Humans had created elaborate dramatizations of their conflicts. They showed battles in detail, complete with strategies, weapons, and consequences. Some of these movies seemed designed to honor soldiers. Others appeared to show the horror of war. All of them demonstrated a deep understanding of combat. They make art about fighting, Resh said, her voice hollow. They turn their wars into stories for entertainment. No, Velnoth said slowly, watching one particular film. They make these to remember, to teach. This film ends with everyone dead. It's not glorifying war. It's warning against it. He was right. Many human war movies had dark endings. They showed suffering and loss. They didn't make war look exciting or fun. They made it look terrible. But they also showed it as something humans understood intimately. The group found human music next. Battle hymns, marching songs, mournful melodies about soldiers who never came home. The variety was stunning. Humans had created music about war for thousands of years, in hundreds of different languages and styles. Every human culture has war songs, Vex realized. From every continent on their planet, from every era of their history, they found poetry next. Stories about warriors and soldiers and battles. Some celebrated victories, many mourned losses. All of them spoke of war as something familiar, something that shaped their cultures deeply. Thrix made a discovery that shook them all. He found a human educational file about their calendar system. It contained a list of human holidays, special days they celebrated each year. Multiple human cultures had days specifically for remembering their war dead. Days set aside to honor soldiers who had died in conflicts. Some of these holidays were thousands of years old and still observed. They have holidays for remembering death in combat, Thrix said. Multiple holidays. This isn't ancient history they've forgotten. This is active remembrance. The final piece came from a video file Vex found. It appeared to be from a human military academy graduation ceremony. Young humans in uniform stood in perfect rows. A speaker addressed them, talking about duty and sacrifice and the weight of the responsibility they were accepting. But what caught their attention was the wall behind the speaker. It was covered in names, Thousands upon thousands of names carved into stone. The camera panned across it and they realized each name was a person. Each name was someone who had died in combat. And this was just one academy. Just one institution. The wall only showed casualties from the past 100 years. And it ran the entire length of a building. How many names are there? Resh whispered. Vex did a quick calculation based on the wall's size and the density of names. At least 50,000, she said. Just on this one wall. The room fell silent. They all understood now. The fragments and pieces they had found weren't outliers or corruptions or mistakes. This was genuinely human history. This was who they were. Humans were a species that had spent millennia fighting. They had developed warfare into a sophisticated system. They had created weapons that could destroy cities. They had waged conflicts that killed millions, and they had done all of this to themselves on their own planet. Before they ever reached the stars, the humans at this facility, the quiet, professional soldiers who trained alongside other species, carried this history with them. Every single one of them was descended from generations of warriors. Combat was part of their heritage, woven into their cultures, embedded in their art and music and literature, and they never spoke about it. Velnoth looked at his companions. They all looked shaken. Even Thrix, who loved battle stories, seemed disturbed by what they had learned. What do we do with this information? Krish asked quietly. I don't know, Velnoth admitted. I truly don't know. That night, as he lay in his quarters trying to sleep, Velnoth thought about every interaction he'd had with humans. He thought about Taeyang's controlled movements in combat. He thought about Minho's sad expression after breaking Grux's arm. He thought about Jisu's warning to stop searching. They weren't hiding strength or power. They were hiding something much more complex. They were hiding the fact that violence came naturally to them, that warfare was part of their species' identity, and that every day they chose to be peaceful despite this nature. No wonder they didn't boast about combat. How could they? Their history wasn't glorious victories and noble stands. It was thousands of years of killing their own kind, nearly destroying themselves multiple times and finally choosing to stop. The classification made sense now. If other species knew the full truth about human military capacity, they would be afraid. They would never fully trust humanity. The peaceful cooperation that existed would crumble under the weight of fear, but Velnoth had learned the truth, and now he had to decide what to do with it. Velnoth couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw images from the files, human trenches, casualty numbers, names carved into stone walls. The weight of what he'd learned pressed down on him like a physical force. At 3 a.m. station time, he gave up trying to rest. He dressed and went to his office. If he couldn't sleep, he could at least try to make sense of things. But making sense seemed impossible. The humans he knew were kind people. Taeyang helped younger cadets with their training. Nari volunteered extra hours in the medical bay. Jisu told jokes and made others laugh. They didn't seem like beings descended from thousands of years of warfare. Yet the evidence was clear. The data didn't lie. Velnoth made a decision. He needed to talk to a human directly. Not subtly, not through careful questions, but openly. He needed real answers, and he needed them from someone who could provide them. He sent a message to Sergeant Oh Suman, requesting an immediate meeting. He invoked his authority as senior trainer and his security clearance as a coalition officer. This was official business now. Suman arrived within 20 minutes. She looked tired but alert. She had probably been asleep when his message arrived, but she showed no irritation at being woken. Commander, she said, bowing slightly. You said it was urgent. Sit down, Sergeant, Velnoth said. His voice was firm. We need to talk about human military history. Suman's expression became guarded. Sir, I've already told you I'm not authorized. I know what the authorization says, Velnoth interrupted. I also know what I've discovered through my own research. I've seen the casualty numbers. I've seen the weapons lists. I've seen enough to understand that everything humans have told us is carefully controlled information. Suman sat down slowly. She looked at him for a long moment, seeming to weigh her options. What exactly did you find? Fragments, Velnoth said. Corrupted files, cultural databases, Enough to know that human history is far more violent than anyone admits. Enough to know that the classification isn't about protecting military secrets. It's about protecting other species from fear. Suman closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she looked sad. You shouldn't have gone looking. I'm responsible for training soldiers from multiple species, Velnoth said. How can I do that effectively if I don't understand them? How can I lead humans in combat if I don't know what they're capable of? That's exactly why the information is classified, Suman said quietly, so you can work with us without being afraid. I'm not afraid, Velnoth said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. You should be, Suman said. Then she sighed deeply. What do you want to know? The truth. All of it. Suman was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, in your species history, Commander, what is the longest war you ever fought? Velnoth didn't need to think. The Great Territorial Conflict. It lasted 17 years. 100,000 casualties from both sides combined. It's remembered as the darkest chapter in our history. We teach children about it so they understand the cost of conflict. Suman nodded slowly. She pulled out her personal tablet and entered a security code. What I'm about to show you is technically above my clearance level. I could face discipline for this, but you're right. You need to understand who we are. She turned the tablet toward him. On the screen was a simple list, just names of conflicts and numbers. But the numbers made Velnoth's stomach sink. The 100 Years' War, Suman read aloud. 116 years, 3.5 million dead. The 30 Years' War, 30 years, 8 million dead. World War I, 4 years, 20 million dead. World War II, 6 years, 85 million dead. She paused, letting the numbers sink in. These are just a few examples, Commander. From one continent, in one time period, we have records of thousands of conflicts, small ones, large ones, brief ones, and wars that lasted generations. Velnoth stared at the numbers. 85 million. In 6 years. His entire species' population was barely 50 million. Humans had killed more of their own kind in a single war than his entire species had ever produced. Why? He asked, his voice rough. How could you do this to yourselves? Because we're good at it, Suman said simply. Humans evolved on a planet where competition was extreme. We learned to work together in groups to survive, but those groups competed with other groups. We developed intelligence that let us create better weapons. We developed social systems that let us organize large armies. We developed ideologies that let us justify killing each other. She scrolled through more data on her tablet. We fought over resources, over territory, over religion, over political systems, over insults to our honor. Sometimes we fought just because we were afraid of each other, and we got very, very good at fighting. But you stopped, Velnoth said. You reached the stars. You joined the coalition. You follow peace protocols. We didn't stop because we couldn't fight anymore, Suman said. We stopped because we finally understood what we were doing to ourselves. We developed weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We came so close to ending our own species that it terrified us into change. She pulled up an image. It showed a mushroom-shaped cloud rising over a city. Even in the still picture, Velnoth could sense the destructive power. Nuclear weapons, Suman said. We used them. Not just developed them, but actually used them in war. We destroyed 2 cities with them, killing hundreds of thousands instantly. And we built enough of them to destroy every city on our planet several times over. That's insane, Velnoth whispered. Yes, Suman agreed. It was. But it was also what finally made us change. When we realized we could end ourselves completely, we stepped back from the edge. We started talking instead of fighting. We built international organizations to prevent wars. We slowly, painfully learned to work together. And when you reached the stars? We were terrified, Suman admitted. We met the Krill and thought, what if they're like us? What if space is just a bigger battlefield? But they weren't. None of you were. We discovered a galaxy where most species talked through their problems. where war was rare and controlled, where the idea of total warfare was unthinkable. She looked directly at Velnoth. When we applied for coalition membership, we had to disclose our history. The coalition council debated for months about whether to accept us. Some members argued that we were too dangerous, that we would bring violence with us. Others argued that our determination to change deserved recognition. Obviously, they accepted you, Velnoth said. With conditions, Suman said. Complete classification of our military history. Mandatory psychological screening for all humans in military service. We're taught from childhood now about the importance of peace. We're taught that violence is a last resort. We're taught to be better than our ancestors. The silence, Velnoth said, understanding. You don't talk about combat because you're trying not to be defined by it. Exactly, Suman said. Every human in this facility knows our history. We carry it with us, but we don't boast about it because there's nothing to boast about. We nearly destroyed ourselves. That's not glorious. That's shameful. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, stars glittered in the darkness of space. We're trying to be better, Commander. Every day, every human in the coalition makes a choice. We choose peace. We choose cooperation. We choose to use our capabilities for protection, not destruction. But that choice requires constant effort. It requires us to remember why we changed. And it requires us to never glorify what we once were. Velnoth sat in silence, processing everything. The pieces finally fit together. The controlled violence, the reluctance to discuss combat, the sadness in their eyes after fights. It all made sense now. When Minho broke Grux's arm, Velnoth said slowly, he looked sad. Not proud, not satisfied. Sad. Because violence comes easily to us, Suman said. Too easily. Minho defended a weaker being, which was right. But the ease with which he could hurt someone reminded him of what humans are capable of. It reminded him of our history. So when I see humans in combat training being so careful, so controlled, you're seeing thousands of years of evolution toward violence being deliberately suppressed, Suman finished. You're seeing us choose restraint over instinct, every time. All the time. Velnoth stood and walked to stand beside her at the window. They looked out at the stars together. Why are you telling me this? He asked. You said it's above your clearance. Because you found out anyway, Suman said. And because you need to understand we're not monsters. We're people who learned from our mistakes. We're a species that looked into the abyss and chose to step back. That should count for something. It does, Velnoth said quietly. But I need time to process this. Take all the time you need, Suman said. Just remember, the humans you train every day are good people. They work hard to be good people. They deserve to be judged for who they are now, not what their ancestors were. She left him alone in his office. Velnoth stood at the window for a long time, watching the stars and thinking about everything he'd learned. The humans weren't hiding weakness. They weren't hiding shame. They were hiding a history so violent that it could inspire fear across the galaxy, and they were working every single day to be better than that history suggested they should be. That, Velnoth thought, might be the most human thing of all. The next morning, Velnoth arrived at training with new eyes. He watched Taeyang demonstrate a defensive technique to younger cadets. Every movement was precise and controlled. Taeyang showed them how to disarm an opponent without injuring them, how to end a fight quickly and safely. But now Velnoth understood what he was really seeing. Taeyang wasn't just teaching a technique. He was teaching restraint. He was teaching humans and non-humans alike how to fight without falling into the patterns that had defined human history for thousands of years. During a sparring session, Velnoth observed something he had never noticed before. Right before engaging, each human paused. It was barely a second, just a brief moment where they seemed to gather themselves. Then they would step forward and begin the exercise. That pause was permission. They were giving themselves permission to use controlled violence. They were reminding themselves of the boundaries they'd set. Even in practice, even in friendly training, they needed that moment to ensure they didn't go too far. At lunch, Velnoth sat near a group of human soldiers. He listened to their conversation without being obvious. They talked about normal things: food preferences, upcoming leave time, a new entertainment program. They laughed and joked like anyone else, but occasionally one of them would mention something from their training, and the tone would shift. Not dramatically, but noticeably. They spoke about combat techniques the way his people might speak about handling dangerous chemicals, with respect and caution, acknowledging the power and the risk. Nari walked past carrying medical supplies. She smiled at Velnoth warmly. He smiled back, but his mind was racing. How many injuries had she treated before joining the coalition? How many wounded soldiers had she saved? She was so young, probably not even 30 years old, yet she had the experience of a trauma surgeon several times her age. Because humans had needed trauma surgeons, they had needed entire medical systems designed to handle combat casualties. That knowledge didn't just disappear when they chose peace. It stayed with them, passed down through training and education, always ready if needed, but hoping never to be used. That afternoon, Thrix approached Velnoth privately. The insect warrior looked troubled. "Commander, I need to speak with you about what we learned." They found a quiet corner of the facility. Thrix's antennae drooped with worry. "I shared some of the information with other cadets," Thrix admitted. "Not all of it, just pieces. But now they're afraid. They look at the humans differently. Some are requesting different training partners." Velnoth sighed. This was exactly what the classification was meant to prevent. "What have you told them?" "Just that humans have fought many wars in their past, that their combat experience is extensive, but even that small amount has caused fear." "Fear of what exactly?" Velnoth asked. "Fear that humans are dangerous," Thrix said. "Fear that they might revert to their old ways. Fear that they're only pretending to be peaceful." Velnoth looked across the training floor where Minho was helping a small Lumine cadet with a drill. The young human was patient and gentle, adjusting the alien's grip on a training weapon with careful movements. "Look at them," Velnoth said to Thrix. "Really look. Are they pretending?" Thrix watched for a moment. "No," he admitted. "They seem genuine." "Because they are," Velnoth said. "Yes, they have a violent history. Yes, they're capable of terrible things. But they chose to change. They work every day to maintain that change. That's not pretending. That's real. But how can we trust them?" Thrix asked. "How can we know they won't fall back into old patterns?" Before Velnoth could answer, another commotion drew their attention. A training accident had occurred. A weapons malfunction had sent energy blasts across the room. 3 cadets were injured, one seriously. The medical team rushed in, led by Nari. Velnoth watched her work. She moved with absolute confidence, assessing injuries, giving orders, treating the wounded. Her hands never shook. Her voice never wavered. The seriously injured cadet was a krill. The energy blast had damaged his wing membrane and caused internal bleeding. It was a life-threatening injury. Nari worked on him for 20 minutes, her full attention focused on keeping him alive. She succeeded. The krill was stabilized and transported to the medical bay. Nari stood up, her uniform stained with blood, and immediately checked on the other 2 injured cadets. Only after confirming they were all safe did she allow herself to sit down. Velnoth approached her. "Excellent work, Specialist." Nari looked up at him with tired eyes. "Just doing my job, sir." "Where did you learn to work under that kind of pressure?" he asked. She was quiet for a moment. "My grandmother was a combat medic," she finally said. "She served in 3 different conflicts before humanity joined the coalition. She taught me that every life matters, that no matter how chaotic things get, you focus on saving whoever you can. She taught you well. She also taught me why she stopped," Nari added, "why she retired as soon as the wars ended and became a teacher instead. She said she'd saved enough lives and never wanted to see another person hurt in combat. That's why I'm here, Commander. I learned her skills so I can help protect others. So that maybe someday no one else will need to learn these skills." Velnoth understood. The humans weren't just carrying their violent history. They were carrying the lessons learned from it. They knew the cost of war because they'd paid it over and over again. They valued peace because they understood what happened without it. That evening, a special visitor arrived at the facility. Colonel Park Yunji, a high-ranking human officer, came for a routine inspection. Velnoth requested a private meeting with her. Colonel Park was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She carried herself with the authority of someone who had seen many things and learned from all of them. "Commander Velnoth," she greeted him. I understand you have questions about human personnel. I have concerns, Velnoth said carefully. I've learned about human history. I understand why it's classified. But I question why humans are allowed in military service at all if they're so dangerous. Colonel Park studied him for a moment. Tell me, Commander, when the Krill were facing extinction from the Void Swarm 3 years ago, who volunteered for the suicide missions? Velnoth remembered. Humans. Every single suicide mission had human volunteers. And when the plague ships threatened the civilian stations at Centauri, who boarded them knowing they would be infected? Human medical teams, Velnoth said quietly. When the refugee convoy was trapped in the Nebula Pass and needed someone to hold off raiders while they escaped, who stayed behind? A human squadron. Velnoth knew all these stories. They were famous within the coalition military. We don't boast about our combat capabilities because we understand what they mean, Colonel Park said. We know that being good at violence isn't something to celebrate. But we also know that sometimes violence is necessary to protect others. That's why we're allowed in military service. Not because we're safe, but because we understand the cost, and we're willing to pay it to protect those who can't protect themselves. She walked to the window and looked out at the training floor. Below, every human in uniform makes a choice, she continued. We choose to use our capabilities for defense, not conquest. We choose to protect, not destroy. We choose to be peacekeepers, not warriors. That choice is what defines us now, not our history. But the risk, Velnoth started. There is always risk, Colonel Park interrupted. Every species in the coalition has the capacity for violence. The difference is that we're honest about ours. We monitor it. We control it. We channel it toward productive ends. Other species might pretend they're above violence, but we know better. We acknowledge what we are and work within that truth. She turned to face him directly. You want to know if you can trust humans? Look at our actions, not our history. We've been in the coalition for 2 decades. In that time, we've never started a conflict. We've never broken a peace treaty. We've never used excessive force. What we have done is save lives, protect the weak, and volunteer for the missions no one else wants. Because you're good at them, Velnoth said. Because we understand them, Colonel Park corrected. We know what it means to fight. We know what it costs. And because we know these things, we can make informed choices about when fighting is necessary and when it isn't. That makes us valuable, not dangerous. Velnoth thought about all the humans he'd observed over the past weeks. Their careful control, their reluctance to glorify combat, their sadness when violence was necessary, their dedication to helping others. They carry it like a weight, he said aloud. Because it is a weight, Colonel Park agreed. Our history, our capabilities, the knowledge of what we're capable of, it's all weight we carry. But we carry it willingly so that others don't have to. That's the choice we made as a species. That's who we are now. Later that night, Velnoth found Taiyang in the observation deck looking out at the stars. The young corporal was alone, lost in thought. Mind if I join you? Velnoth asked. Of course not, sir, Taiyang said, making room. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, Velnoth spoke. I learned about your history, he said simply. Taiyang didn't look surprised. I figured someone would eventually. Was it bad? It was honest, Velnoth said. And it helped me understand. Understand what, sir? Why you're all so quiet about it. Commander Velnoth spent the next 3 days trying to access human military records. Each attempt met the same wall of classification. He tried searching for specific battles. Classified. He searched for human weapons technology. Classified. He even searched for basic historical timelines of human conflicts. Every single file was sealed. This only made him more determined. He began asking other species about their experiences with humans in combat. The answers he received were carefully worded and strangely similar. A Krill officer who had served with humans during the Void Swarm crisis said, they were effective soldiers, very professional. When pressed for details, the officer suddenly remembered an urgent meeting. A Thorian merchant who had witnessed human peacekeepers in action said, they resolved the situation quickly. Then he changed the subject to trade routes. Every conversation followed the same pattern. People acknowledged that humans could fight, but no one would discuss specifics. It was as if everyone had been told to avoid the topic. Velnoth decided to try a different approach. He requested a meeting with Sergeant O'Suman, one of the human tactical instructors at the facility. She agreed to meet him in a private training room. Suman arrived exactly on time. She was a woman of average height with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her movements were precise and economical. She bowed slightly in greeting, a human custom Velnoth had learned meant respect. "Thank you for meeting with me, Sergeant," Velnoth said. "Of course, Commander. How can I help you?" Her voice was pleasant and professional. "I want to understand human combat training better, to help me train the mixed species units more effectively." Suman nodded. "What would you like to know? Where do your combat techniques come from? What is their origin?" "They come from our military academies," she replied. "Each human soldier trains for several years before joining the coalition forces." "Yes, but where did your academies learn these techniques? What is the history behind them?" Something changed in Suman's expression. It was subtle, just a small tightening around her eyes. "Commander, I'm not authorized to discuss detailed human military history." "Why not?" Velnoth asked directly. "Every other species shares their martial traditions freely. Why are humans different?" Suman was quiet for a moment. "Because our history is complicated," she finally said, "and because sharing it would not benefit anyone." "That is not a real answer." "It's the only answer I can give you," Suman said. Her tone was apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, Commander." After she left, Velnoth felt more frustrated than before. The humans weren't just avoiding the topic. They were under orders not to discuss it. This was an official policy, not personal choice. Meanwhile, other incidents kept occurring. During a weapons training session, Specialist Nari demonstrated field medicine techniques. She showed the class how to treat various injuries under combat conditions. Her methods were efficient and clearly practiced many times before. An alien cadet asked, "How many injured soldiers have you treated?" Nari paused while wrapping a practice bandage. "Enough to know what works," she said quietly. "But you're so young," the cadet pressed. "Humans have been in the coalition for less than one generation. When would you have treated so many injuries?" "Before we joined the coalition," Nari said. "Next, I'll demonstrate treatment for plasma burns." She changed the subject smoothly, but the cadets noticed. The way she had said "before we joined the coalition" suggested something. It suggested that humans had been treating combat injuries long before they met other species. But the coalition had been at peace during that time. So where had all those injuries come from? That afternoon, Velnoth reviewed training footage from the past month. He watched humans spar with other species. He slowed the playback and studied their movements carefully. What he noticed made his scales prickle with unease. The humans were always holding back. Every single one of them. They would strike hard enough to win the match, but never harder than necessary. They would use joint locks that could disable an opponent, but they always stopped before causing real damage. It wasn't just good sportsmanship. It was constant, careful control. It was like watching someone carry a container of explosive material. Every movement careful, every action measured, not because they lacked confidence, but because they knew exactly how dangerous they could be. Velnoth called a meeting with Ambassador Krill, an avian diplomat who had been with the coalition longer than most. Krill's species had sponsored humanity's membership application years ago. If anyone knew the truth, it would be him. They met in a private dining area. Krill pecked at seeds while Velnoth explained his concerns. "Why is human combat history classified?" Velnoth asked directly. Krill's feathers ruffled slightly. "That information is above my clearance level. But you supported their membership. You must have known something." "I knew enough to believe they deserved a chance," Krill said carefully. "I knew they were sincere about wanting peace." "What does that mean?" "Why would their sincerity be in question?" Krill set down his seeds. "Commander, I cannot tell you what is classified. But I can tell you this: humans are good people. They work hard to be good people. That should be enough." "Work hard to be good?" Velnoth repeated. "Why would being good require hard work?" Krill looked at him with ancient, knowing eyes. "For some species, peace is natural. For others, it is a choice they make every day. The humans choose peace. That is what matters." The ambassador would say nothing more. Velnoth returned to his quarters feeling more troubled than ever. He reviewed everything he knew. Humans were exceptional fighters who refused to discuss fighting. Their history was sealed behind the highest security classification. Other species who had served with them were reluctant to share details. And according to Ambassador Krill, humans had to work hard to be peaceful. What did that mean? What kind of species had to struggle to maintain peace? Late that night, Velnoth made a decision. If official channels wouldn't give him answers, he would find another way. The next morning, he began making discreet inquiries. He contacted information brokers who operated in the gray areas of coalition law. He reached out to data specialists who could crack lower-level security. It would take time and resources, but Velnoth was determined. He needed to understand the truth about humans, not just for his own curiosity, but because he was responsible for training them. How could he train soldiers if he didn't understand them? 3 days later, he received a coded message. One of his contacts had found something. A partially corrupted database from an abandoned coalition research station. The files were old, from when humans first applied for membership. Security protocols had been different then, less strict. The data would cost him a month's salary. Velnoth paid without hesitation. The files arrived encrypted. It took him several hours to decode them. When he finally opened the first document, his hands trembled slightly. This was it. This was the truth he had been seeking. The document was titled, Initial Assessment of Human Species, Military Capacity Analysis. Velnoth began to read. With each paragraph, his eyes widened. With each page, his certainty crumbled. By the time he reached the end, he sat in stunned silence. The document didn't contain complete information. Large sections were corrupted or redacted, but what remained was enough. More than enough. Humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years. Not with other species, but with each other. The document listed conflicts by era, and the numbers were staggering. Hundreds of wars, thousands of battles. The casualty figures made Velnoth's stomach turn. One corrupted image file had partially loaded. It showed humans in primitive uniforms standing in trenches. The ground around them was destroyed. Bodies lay everywhere. The weapons they held were crude by modern standards, but the destruction they had caused was evident. This was just one moment from human history, one tiny fragment of their past. And if the numbers in the document were correct, moments like this had occurred thousands of times. Velnoth closed the file. He sat in the darkness of his quarters, trying to process what he had learned. The humans at this facility, the quiet and professional soldiers he trained every day, came from a species that had nearly destroyed itself through constant warfare. No wonder their combat history was classified. No wonder they didn't boast about fighting. They weren't hiding weakness. They were hiding something far more disturbing. They were hiding the fact that they were, by nature, a warrior species unlike any other in the galaxy.